Hello and welcome to the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum for September 20th, 2023. This live panel discussion is about what should be in an annual security awareness program. I'm Scott Wright, the Security Awareness Experience Guy. I'm also CEO of ClickArmor, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But for now, we're ready to have another fun session, and I'd like to ask Ryan to introduce our panel, and then we'll get into the session.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everyone. We've got some new panelists today, so we'll start there with Elizabeth Orpina. She's a security awareness professional currently working at GitHub with over 5 years of experience in the space. She brings her background in nonprofit work now to tech companies to inspire and maintain strong security cultures amongst employees. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. Next up, we've got Erin Gallagher. She's been working in the security awareness field for 5 years as well. She's helped build programs for companies ranging from 1,200 employees to 500,000. Erin has a true passion for maintaining the human connection in all things security and awareness. Welcome, Erin. It's great to have you. And finally, Michelle L. is the founder of Risu, a consultancy that helps startups to create meaningful and simple security education strategies. She's also an expert target shopper and gets therapy from Peloton rides. So thank you for coming back, Michelle. It's great to have all of you. I also know we have a few cats today that may make appearances, so if we want to introduce them at any point, please let me know. And I'm Ryan Healey-Ogden, the Director of Cybersecurity Solutions here at ClickArmor. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And I'll just say, in the chat there, if you ever want to drop questions for the panelists throughout the session today, please do so. I'll try and work them in. And we'll kick it off just by letting us all know where you are joining from today. If you just drop that in the chat, and I'll hand it back over to Scott, and we'll kick it off.
Thanks very much, Ryan. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to grab it if you can't stay for the whole thing. We'll announce that in a couple of days. But yeah, today's session is going to be talking about what should go into an annual security awareness program. And some places have an annual program. Some of them just kind of keep doing what they do. But let's hear from the professionals who are doing these things and some lessons learned and tips. Through this program, just a really quick bit of housekeeping. We actually record these sessions. We take the transcripts. We create blog posts out of them and put them on the ClickArmor website. We also take those transcripts and distill them into an industry report every 3 months. And so we have our Q2 industry report right now that's available for you. Really just has a lot of the highlights from each of the sessions. And so in this particular session, it's going to be interesting to hear input from different security professionals and managers about what's in their plan or their program for the year. Throughout this session, I'm going to be popping up some polls for the attendees to answer. I'll try and stop at a logical point and launch them so you get a chance to think about them. But if I don't get a chance, then we might just throw them out there and hopefully you'll get a chance to address them. But all that said, I'm going to start with just a little bit of a run through of the things that I've seen in 15 years or so. I've been doing security awareness training and consulting for different organizations. So a lot of times what works really well is to start by assessing the landscape, looking at things in detail around what are the opinions of people, what are the opinions of executives, which I think is actually really important to gather. Then we start defining what are the objectives and scope based on the assessments that we've had or the observations. Then we can look at what are the content areas that we need to prioritize. And we also want to set up communication channels because we need to let people know in advance what's coming. I've been in organizations where everybody gets an invitation to do a course and they had no idea that they were going to be required to do a course or whether this was even a phishing attack to invite them. So it's important to get the communication angle out there at the beginning. Then, of course, deploying training. Gamifying learning is something that I'm pretty passionate about, and it's something that we're finding is really required when people are sort of always set to disengage with the training. So something that keeps it engaging is important. Then we'll talk about phishing simulations, one of our favorite topics. And sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not. And so I put in here if required, but we're going to talk about that a bit. Setting up reporting channels. Of course, all this work you want to do, you should be able to report on. You should be able to show people what progress perhaps you're making, at least getting the activities done, if not getting some different outcomes, if that's what you're expecting. But you always want to be assessing on a regular basis how things are going and whether you want to make adjustments. And you're going to learn a lot if this is your first year trying to create a security awareness program. You'll learn a lot about some of the barriers and obstacles and things that you didn't really think of ahead of time, but that's okay. Hopefully you'll learn some things to be a little more prepared through this session. And generally, we want to try to foster a culture of security. Sometimes that's hard when you're just trying to start out and do all these things. But once you gain a bit of confidence around what you're doing and that you're supported by executives, then you can actually start doing some really interesting and valuable things to improve the organization's culture. And of course, resource sharing and collaboration is what we're doing right now. You want to learn from others and keep improving your program internally and helping other people as well. So those are the main outline areas that I wanted to cover and just get people to start thinking about these things. We have a couple of guiding questions that we can ask the panel and get their input on. And what I'll do is I'll ask panelists to raise their hand in the Zoom application, and Ryan will call on you in order that the hands were up, and we'll stay on the topic as long as we're seeing value, but we do want to try and move on to other topics through the session and get those poll questions in. Towards the end, we'll ask you to kind of summarize what do you think you got out of this session? What was valuable to executives or to managers, practitioners like yourselves, or to individuals? What kinds of things can people take away from this? So here are the 3 poll questions that are going to come up. It's sometimes they overlap a little bit with the session questions that we're going to ask the panelists, but we're going to ask you at some point, how does your annual security awareness plan get created? I asked this one on the LinkedIn poll a few days ago, and it's interesting to see the results on that. One of the options is we have no explicit plan, management drives it, or we make it up in isolation, or we consult with a lot of teams. Second question is, what topics are essential for a first-year security awareness program? When I say first year, I'm hoping to help as many people as possible who are new in the role, and maybe you can share what's worked in your organization. Thirdly, do you have access to resources such as corporate communications, video, or graphic artists for content production for your awareness training and communications? So those are poll questions that you're going to see pop up. So let's go to the first question and see what people have as answers to this. And as Ryan mentioned, anyone who's listening and has access to the chat, feel free to enter your comments or questions for the panelists about these questions. So I'd like to ask the panel, first of all, what do you think are the top factors that will dictate what's in your security awareness plan, and or about anything that will cause it to be successful or to fail? So let's let people think about that for a moment. And Ryan, you can either just call on somebody or see if anybody's got their hand up.
Well, no hands up yet, but also I just wanted to kind of review some of the chat where people are coming from today. Well, we give everyone just a minute to think about the questions, but we've got people. Where are we coming from here? Where are they? Where did they all go? New York City, Toronto. I'm up in Ramera, Ontario. New Hampshire. Yeah, that's a new one. Chicago, Illinois, and that's Barrie, Ontario. So we've got some, and I know we've got panelists that are out in the West Coast. We've got panelists that are over in the UK. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's always exciting. And one last thing I forgot to mention in my intros, we are able to offer CPE credits for anyone who's attending today. So if you are interested in that, please just reach out to me after, and I will get that information for you. So Erin, we will hand it over to you.
So a lot of my answers are going to be, it depends, which I think somebody else here is going to that answer as well. But it depends on what year you're in. So I'm just creating this awareness program now. So a lot of the resources and activities that we have planned for this year are starting with the basics, not necessarily the basics because I work for a tech company currently. So there is an understanding. We know what phishing is. We know what passwords are. We know how to create them, but still introducing some of the baseline topics, maybe at a more technical level. But a lot of that also comes with conversations with those teams and with the people who have been in the company already for quite some time. So, management, people who have been in security, those are going to be what helps me determine, or what has been helping me determine, what I'm doing for this year. So especially for Security Awareness Month, which I'm sure the three of us are probably like full steam ahead trying to plan right now. That took a lot of identification from other teams on what have we done in the past? What should we do in the future? Should we make it bigger? Should we make it smaller? And also making sure that we have buy-in from our leadership.
Yeah, solid. Elizabeth, thoughts?
Literally picking up exactly where Erin is leaving off. My first note that I was taking for myself is leadership buy-in. And that influences the budget you're given, or, if you're coming in with an existing budget of what they maybe paid for last year with the security awareness training, that might be all you get. You're also, it really just depends on leadership buy-in, and leadership specifically on the security team. I also think another factor that kind of determines the resources and the activities of your program plan is your company culture and the appetite for education, the existing structures for internal communications. Is there an effective and efficient intranet? Does the company use Slack or Teams? Are people engaged? Are there other things going on in the company, like, the forbidden word, layoffs, the macroeconomic conditions? Are those affecting how people, take requests from the security team or any other team? If we're asking them to do a training, are people burnt out? That's really going to affect the appetite for anything you have going on. And there's no one size fits all effective awareness program, like Erin alluded to. And I think the last thing I'm going to say is, for right now, is your ability to build and manage relationships across the company and throughout the department, your ability to take advantage of those existing programs, resources, skill sets, to identify opportunities for collaboration, automation, what already exists in the environment that you can utilize to inform the resources and the activities of your program.
Valid point. Something I just thought of. I don't know if any of you have kind of encountered this or even had internal conversations about this. When it comes to training and education inside a workforce, and we've heard this term for the last year and a bit of quiet quitting. Is that something where you guys as security awareness managers would kind of see that as a potential roadblock for success? And has there been anything that you guys have kind of uncovered in order to get over that roadblock, where people are like, they're just showing up for their basics and that's it, right? Don't tell me what to click. Don't tell me, what to not do and do.
Work to rule. Yeah.
Yeah, right, basically. And so, yeah, Michelle, you've got your hand up. I'd love to hear the insight on that.
Yeah, so just, it's really nice to hear Elizabeth saying all those things, because I think we have to be really mindful of that, of all the different things that are going on in the world at the moment, which are, so much bigger often than the messaging we might want to put out. And so therefore, what I would say is relating to, quiet quitting or any other, because we have quite a lot of quiet firing now as well, don't we, and all the rest of it, or, there's just a lot going on. And so I would always say that the messaging, regardless of leadership buy-in, because that is obviously very important, you have to decide what messaging you're going to do, what your kind of core themes are going to be for the year or whatever else, or even the first couple of quarters, because you probably need to reassess it after that anyway. And what are our priorities, and what do we think there's an appetite for within the business? Because are people just going to be because I've seen people just try and go down a whole route of even things like, right, we're going to stop people charging any device in the office, and we're going to put posters up about that, and that's going to be security awareness. And you laugh, but that's something I've heard very recently, and that's not something that's going to get you goodwill, and it's going to be something that people they're just exhausted already. People are exhausted. I think we're all exhausted. We're all stressed, and I think it's worth trying to work out how can we show that we're working with people and we're trying to help them, is what I'd say.
Absolutely. And Erin.
Just in agreement with everybody else that your activities really should be determined based on those relationship buildings and the understanding of your organization. And it's so important to not come into an organization and assume what worked for your last organization is going to work for this one. So I came from an insurance company, working at a tech company, before, but one of 500,000 people versus 1,200 people. I can have a lot more intimate conversations with people at a 1,200 person company than I can at a 500,000 person company. So making sure that you have a good understanding, I think, like Elizabeth said, of your current culture, whether you have people who are exhausted or overwhelmed by the messaging that's been previous, or just don't care. You're always going to have people that just don't care. But it's our job in this role to change our messaging, like Michelle was saying, to make sure that maybe there is a way to get people to care. Maybe it's not by every single webinar giving somebody a call to action to do something. Maybe it's just talking about an interesting topic to baby step them into the security world with an interesting topic versus do this, and this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might even be more like if they're not really engaged in the workplace, how do we parlay this to their personal life? So at least if they adopt some of these security best practices and they take them home, well, by nature, they may also enact them at work, right? So it's just it might not be necessarily focusing on the job aspect of things, but just in the general, hey, maybe don't open this attachment kind of idea. It doesn't matter where you are, job, home, at your friend's house, whatever, just maybe more casual might go a longer way.
And I think that's true.
Oh, sorry.
I think that's true. What you're saying too, is that all the advice that I think, give out should be applicable for not just work, because if we're helping protect people in their personal life, we're in turn protecting our own data and our own organizational information, because you're getting people into the habit of doing it consistently, not just for one part of their life. Yeah,
and we have to put the hat on as the attacker, which I often do, and try and think, okay, so how would I, go after a target? If I'm going to be going up against a company like Fastly or GitHub, that have everything in place, security, measures in place, they have training, they have all this, well, then maybe I go after the employee that, is posting too much on social media on the weekends. Maybe I, go do some social engineering at the grocery store and stuff like that. So it's like just making people aware that they are targets outside of that 9-to-5 confine, might actually go a long way in helping sell that as well. And Scott?
Yeah, I love the discussion. I think this is exactly what I was hoping for, to start talking first about the relationships and the executive support. It's one of the things in the number of projects I've done in security awareness. Initially, when I started out, I was hired by a security awareness manager as a consultant to say, can we do this thing? And I'd put it together. And all of a sudden you get a bunch of unexpected reactions from different parts of the organization because you didn't communicate to them what you're doing. And so the more successful ones I've been involved with in the last several years, we all start with executive interviews. And it might seem daunting at first to somebody who's new to the organization or relatively junior to be talking to executives who have very important things to do, let's face it, right? But they are actually open and they recognize the importance of cybersecurity now. And so you can actually ask for your managers or your own line executive support to say, we need to get in front of these people and talk to them about their own perceptions. And what I typically do is 1-to-1 or 1-to 2 or 3 people within a particular executive area function, and just start to ask them things like, what is their vision for an ideal security awareness program? And what has their experience been in the past with programs that worked or didn't work? And then move on to things like they're always concerned about metrics and dashboards, right? They want to be able to report things efficiently. So what are the metrics that they're going to want to see from the program that will indicate that there's progress or success happening? And then finally, what are the barriers? What are the things that they think will be a problem? Maybe it's the culture, maybe it's the budget or the technologies, whatever. Those are the things that are really important to elicit from executives. And you may or may not get a lot of information from them, but just the fact that you reach out to them starts that relationship. And I think it's really important for people to build the relationships, if possible, at the highest level. Now, in a 500,000 person organization like Aaron's talking about, that's really daunting, right? You're not necessarily going to even get a chance to talk to all the executives. And so there's a different approach I would recommend there. And that is setting up some kind of a networking forum like we're doing now for the public, but within your organization, you can start to build connections of people who care about security, who will help you and who make connections even within large organizations. So those are my thoughts on that. All right, so let's see if I can start a poll now before we go to our next. There. And we're going to start with the question of, does your annual security awareness plan, how does your annual security awareness plan get created? And so if you have insights into that, maybe you're a security awareness manager, maybe you have some visibility into how your awareness program is being planned and deployed. But it would be interesting to hear from different people, what are the trends right now around how your awareness plan for the year gets created? So while we're letting people answer that, I'm going to move on to our next topic, which I mentioned I was going to tell you a little bit about ClickArmor. If you haven't heard of us before, we deliver more engaging and educational content with less effort and in less time than other platforms. Basically, because of my experience in teaching security awareness, I realized that engagement is the #1 element in terms of getting people to actually learn from the training. And that requires a lot of interactivity. It requires relevant scenarios and the chance to actually spot problems or risks that they're going to see in the real world. And it also needs to be quick to implement, because none of us as security awareness managers actually have a lot of time or experience in delivering training. And so sometimes that's why you see death by PowerPoint security awareness programs where the IT manager, goes through these technical things and nobody really pays attention. So we really focus on engagement, interactivity, and making it easy for managers to deploy security awareness training in a really fun way that is actually scalable. Because if you're not doing it with videos, then you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to change or create new content. So that's how we do things at ClickArmor. If you're interested in learning more, just use the QR code and reach out to us. So the next question for the panel is, what are the core topics that should be in a first-year security awareness training program? We talked about, what are the factors that make it successful, but what are the things that you think at this point are probably required in most organizations? Now, obviously, it's going to be different for every organization, but there should probably be a core of topics that we want to see within the first year. Anybody want to take a start at that?
And Aaron, hand up first.
It depends. It doesn't. So the first year content, I almost take a little differently. And I, in my head, want to change it to what I think, if you're going to have some sort of annual training, what that should cover every year. And I think every year that should cover phishing and social engineering. I think that should cover passwords and multi-factor authentication. And then the other pieces should be spread out. I think everything's really important, but I think giving it to everybody all at once is going to be way too overwhelming. So I think depending on the level of security understanding, which comes from what we just talked about, learning the different pieces of your organization, and understanding what level they're at. There was a really great, if anybody attended the SANS Summit this year, there was a really good presentation about security as a recipe, and that some groups take a little bit more salt, some take a little bit more sugar, some take a little extra time to bake. You need to understand that per group. Like I said before, I'm not teaching people what phishing is, but I might teach them the cycle of how phishing happens from an attacker's perspective, something that might be more interesting to them. So I still think phishing is an important topic to cover, and social engineering, but it's how I go about those conversations. So I think the basics are always important, and the basics should always be repeated, but making sure that you add on it every time to make sure that you're not redundant in what you're saying.
Awesome.
And a lot of that's getting reiterated in the chat as well, and it's interesting. We see a lot of the same themes, and we also see a lot of like top-down support over and over. And so I wonder if that comes from a place of, and feel free to like drop that in the chat. Is that coming from a place of frustration or from a place of success? Have you seen a great security culture because you have that top-down support, or are you asking for it because you just wish that the executives would do what everyone else does? That's what I'm always curious about as well. Michelle, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so kind of to answer the question, but also to answer your recent question that you just said, Ryan, I think in the first year as well, I think if you're talking about an embryonic security awareness program, that you're not taking over from anybody else, or even if you are taking it over from somebody else, I think listening is something that we forget hugely. And I see this happen again and again. And I will often say to even large organizations that I advise, you just got to go out and do some focus groups and come bring it back to a bit more qualitative stuff, which is where your security champions become very valuable, and getting those out and about and really working out what it is the business needs. Because it might be that you think that you need to go out, because the business will always say, well, the insurers or whatever else it is, whatever summit or whatever thingy, whoever was on a podium the other day talking because they were an influencer said that it should be phishing, or it should be this, or it should be, oh my God, it's, whatever happened at MGM, right? And actually the people in the organization might be sick to the death of that, and they might have already got that. But actually there might be something a bit deeper, or they might be trying to do what you're asking them to do, but there might be blockers. And really, I think the leadership buy-in thing is something that I think comes from that problem, because you don't get marketing or sales or finance having to beg for leadership buy-in. But for some reason, cybersecurity always has this problem. And I think it's because we don't listen, and we don't, we're often in security education, awareness, whatever you're calling it, kind of asking, begging security teams to just act a bit more sensitively and professionally, because we're supposed to be the ones articulating things up to the board and communicating upwards about really critical messaging and what the business needs. And you might be hearing all this noise from outside about MGM, but our real issue is this, for instance, or MGM is an issue because this is something that could happen to us. But they need that from us, and I don't think they always get that, because I think they get a lot of vanity metrics and other things, because that's where your leadership buy-in comes, when you act professionally. That's all I'd say.
Awesome. Anyone else? There's some really good comments in the chat. And any you'd like to highlight, Ryan?
I think we just, Shelley made a kind of a quick synopsis of a year one, announced the program, engage senior leadership to reinforce the message, plan for communication of progress quarterly or biannually. So again, it's all about communication. It's all about, I think, combining that with what Michelle said of listening, absorbing, and then talking about it. Like maybe you don't, bombard your team with all kinds of information that you haven't explained, right? So I think these are all valid points, for sure.
Elizabeth has a.
Oh, Elizabeth's got your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to also add on to what Michelle and Aaron said. It really depends on the environment you're working with, how you're going to have to spend a lot of time. If you're the first one establishing the security awareness program, you want to evaluate the environment you're in, which includes your own security team. How good is it? What kind of configurations have they already put in place? What automations have they done? What policies are adopted that make your job easier? What makes the program more mature? What are you walking into? For example, with a company made up of mostly engineers, you may not need to have any trainings on phishing, or it might just be a required compliance thing that, depending on, all of the compliance like FedRAMP or all those kinds of more advanced audit requirements, that may inform some of your core topics of what you need to add to the security awareness training. You might just start with the basics there. But I also think, and this is kind of not related to topics, but it's what goes into your first year. It might be just not topics. It might be like projects such as selecting a learning management system, revamping the annual training, looking at what audit is requiring, unfortunately, like, okay, do we need to address insider threat or physical security now? And I think also, if you're really kind of looking for guidance there, start with your threat and response team. Just ask them, what are the topics we need to talk about? They'll tell you exactly. And it may not be what you think it is. They might be like, we really just need to focus on, SSH keys. That's it. That's all we need to talk about. We don't phish. We don't use email. No need to worry about that at all. So then that kind of informs exactly where you want to start.
Yeah, and I heard that before from Erin when she said her organization doesn't use email for internal communication. You're like, boom, an attack vector completely kind of removed, right? I mean, that's well done. Okay, let's focus on what we can do. And that's where generic training just doesn't come into play, right? And that's where just going through those typical exercises won't affect your company the same way, because your attack vectors are very different. But for GitHub, yeah, I would assume SSH keys would be at the top of the priority list, right? Everyone's going to have their different unique items. Michelle?
Just quickly, I saw someone in the chat say, because I think what Elizabeth and Erin were saying is very, very true. And I think somebody was saying, oh, but we need quick wins. And I think I want to just try and reassure people, this is the kind of thing I push back on with, and I help security teams with all the time, is you decide. You are a professional in your own right. And there will always be, I think, well, I'd love it to change, but I think at the moment there are quite often you're brought in because you're a compliance person at base a lot of the time, and then they're like, oh, I've been told when I was in house, we need you to be louder, we need you to do that. I can't be. What do you want me to do? Just walk around with symbols and or put posters up? That doesn't make any difference. There's psychology behind that. Please God. But I think it's just having that, and that's where I think the leadership buy-in comes as well. You need your first year as well, is often really developing those relationships and getting the core support with whoever your sponsors are, because that might not even be within your security team. It might be across other teams that might see the value in you as well. That's where I've often found it. But the quick wins, you need to just push back and go, listen, we're not necessarily going to see, I don't know, some massive metric here. What I'm going to do is tell you over a year or over a few months, over the next quarter, I'm going to tell you what I found. Then we're going to do something meaningful, because I think they've just got used to seeing, well, we've got a click rate of whatever, or, this is amazing. And it's too much. So you can do what you want, but you don't have to be, fireworks all the time. It's quiet work.
Yeah. It's about the message, not necessarily how you deliver it, right? If you make an effective message that is personalized and relatable to the employees, then they're going to listen. You don't have to yell at someone to get them to listen. I think this is the lesson. Yeah. Erin?
I just want to continue on what Michelle just said. Our field is not a quick win field. We are a proactive and reactive in a lot of situations too, but our game here is to make it a long-term thing. We are here for the long game. And talking about, the first year, I'm in my first year here at Fastly. I'm in month 5 at this point. And the most important thing for me right now is identification. It's like Elizabeth said, talking to my SecOps team, learning what threats actually are effective or are targeted at Fastly, and learning about what those topics should potentially be. And I want to talk to somebody else's comment that was like a little while ago. Not only is this like the long game, but this is a very fluid program, and it always needs to be, because we are essentially customer service and PR and marketing and HR for our security teams. And we want to make sure that our program for our customers, which are our internal employees, I think for most of us here, makes sense to what they want to hear, what they need to hear, and how they want that message delivered to them. So just trying to agree with whoever had commented, I'm sorry, I forgot who said it, that this is a constantly changing program based on what people want to hear, what they need to hear. So it's kind of hard to always plan that out quite a long time in advance. So just wanted to make that comment too about the first year.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. Great comments. I'll just add a couple of things. One of them on the topic of technology or technology focused organizations that might not need to do phishing or might not need to do security awareness training. It almost sounds like sacrilege to some people, but I think it's possible that, we've worked with organizations where they have a high number of technical people who are constantly getting certifications. They're always going through training and they just can't stand doing another training course. So there could be elements of your organization that don't really need the security awareness training, and you should be trying to work on customizing your program to understand which people need the training and which don't. So that was my one thing. The other quick one is to talk about, this isn't a place for quick wins. I agree, but you're still going to get pushback from executives who need that compliance number, right? They need to show that we're getting 90% of people through the program in 8 weeks or whatever. And that is possible. We're doing that.
It's that ROI battle as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's where,
But for real meaningful results, I think, it won't necessarily be quick wins. So that was what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share the poll results that from the first question, which was, how does your annual security awareness plan get created? Only 1 of 18 people said they had no explicit plan in their organization. 4 or 22% said management drives it. 3 or 17% said we make it up in isolation. And a healthy 10 or 56% said we consult with many teams. That's awesome. It's actually better results than I expected to see.
I also saw one in the chat that wasn't on there where Chris actually said it's their culture that will kind of create their plan. So by creating a solid culture, your plan will, in essence, start to create itself.
Yeah, for sure. While we have a break here, I'm just going to launch the second poll question, which is, what topics are essential for a first-year security awareness program? We just talked about that with the panel, so they don't need to address this one, but I'm going to ask people to put their votes in for this. And then we'll move on to our next question, which is, how do you adjust your plan for year 2 and beyond, right? I mean, year 1 is going to go as planned, right? You're going to finish up right after 12 months. And what are you going to do next? So maybe that's not exactly true.
I think we should ask Erin this one first, just because she's 5 months in. And so she should be she should start planning now what's going to happen on month 13, right?
Like I said, it's fluid. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. No, but I want to actually call out somebody else I know in the industry who has done a really good job of planning for year 2 and beyond. And they have a virtual security academy that they change every year. That it's an opt-in program, and they have I think it's similar to a security champions program, but it's not. It's more informational. And sorry, my cat's now interested in my hair clip. But they do a really good job of that, year 2 and beyond, where they are continually stepping up, their content to be something different every year and to be more advanced than the next one. And I think they do that with their phishing simulations too. They have different levels at which they do their phishing simulations for different groups. So, she does a really great job at this year 2 and beyond piece. Like I said, I'm 5 months in, so ask me.
We will.
All right. Any other comments from the panel or in the chat?
Yeah, has someone? Yeah, I was going to say, Elizabeth, have you gone through year 2? How was that transition, and what did you kind of learn and change?
Yeah, so I'm officially in. I think I'm almost hitting, or maybe just hitting, my 18 months. At my current company. So currently in year 2, and again, our favorite phrase, it depends. Our budget's frozen. And how do you hear that as soon as you start, or every single year? It depends on, are you allowed to hire contractors? Do you have access to technical program managers that can help you build out? It's like, what does the company require of you in terms of OKR planning? Do you have that kind of support as well? Are you in the right area of your department? I've experienced being moved from different teams, a variety of different teams at the companies I've worked at for this job. kind of evaluating, like, am I getting the support I need on the current team that I'm on? Do I have the right connections? Am I in the right department? Sometimes security awareness people don't live within the security department. And I've heard of that. I'm currently in that. We're changing that, but it depends on what kind of changes can you make to get different kinds of support and different kinds of teammates. And then also, I think finally is, how did the company react and the leadership react to year one? Were they satisfied? Are they asking for more? Are they just kind of telling you, just keep doing what you're doing? And that will inform what your plan is for year two. Because sometimes, and especially in this economy, and all the macroeconomic conditions and all that kind of stuff, they might just be like, you know what? You're not going to get a budget again you're not going to get a budget next year. We're not going to have any more hiring. We're not going to do any backfills. Just continue doing the training and doing what you can for free 99. And that might just set the stage for what you're going to do for year two.
Yeah, fair enough. Some comments from the chat as well. Shelley says, I prefer planning the year out in quarterly snapshots. Also in year two, doing the tenured versus new hires on separate tracks. So that's an interesting way to then, you kind of split up your program depending on against the needs of the business. But yeah, the free 99 comment. It's getting some love, but that is, I think, the number one thing, and it comes back to listening. I think what Michelle said too is what was the feedback from year one? What was the appetite? Did the culture get better? Did the culture get worse? Did people participate? I mean, all of these things should be taken into account before you just go ahead and do the same thing. But we all don't have that liberty and freedoms within our role as well. Sometimes we just have to do what we're told or do what we can with what we have.
Yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to return back to the poll just to share the results of the most recent one. So the topics that people feel are essential for first-year security awareness program, not a big surprise, security basics is the highest at 47%, phishing 24%, social engineering 12%, passwords 6%, malware nobody. That's interesting. I agree. I don't recommend, necessarily teaching people about malware. They don't need to know about malware. They need to know about the kinds of threats that are going to trigger them to potentially launch it, but it's not really malware that they need to learn about. And operations security, or OPSEC, as we call it, might have been better if I put that in there. But yeah, really interesting poll results. So thanks everybody for doing that. And we'll launch one more before we go into our last area. And that is, do you have access to resources such as corporate communications, video, graphic artists, etc., for content production? Simple question. Yes, we get lots or some or none, or I don't know. So I'll let people chew on that for a while. And that will be our last poll question. And then I will move on to did we have our last question? Yes, we did. So I'm going to go back to my deck here and just sort of wrap things up by saying, what do you feel were the session's best insights so far around planning for security awareness program, whether it's year one or beyond? Just add your comments in the chat, or any of the panelists want to highlight some of the things that we talked about, just to reiterate the key takeaways for working with executives, for implementing, and for individuals.
Yeah, I just had another kind of semi-poll question I just thought I'd ask the panel too. If you had to pick one for a successful security program, would you pick the budget that you asked for, or the buy-in and support from the executive team that you need?
Ooh, deep thoughts.
Buy-in, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't think, because you can do a lot for free. We're all used to doing quite a lot on the cheap.
And if you get buy-in, you can ask for more budget.
Oh,
yeah, but it shouldn't need to be expensive. You can make a lot for free, but just having the support is worth a lot, because you can have a lot of resources and you're making beautiful stuff. Yeah. But if it's going nowhere.
Exactly. Any other thoughts on summarizing what we talked about today?
I think Elizabeth has her hand up.
Oh, that was about just exactly what you all were saying in terms of if you get leadership buy-in, you get budget.
Yep.
We need more dogs on this webinar, I have to say. This has made my day.
Yeah.
Not that Elizabeth isn't fantastic just in and of herself, or Erin, of course, or any of the guys, but I do appreciate that.
I agree. Elizabeth has by far the most adorable pets.
Yeah.
It's actually been just a roadshow of pets today too. So
Yeah.
But what have we learned? We have learned that pets are awesome.
I used to put dogs in my security awareness, and I asked for people to send me their dogs, and I'd make a cybersecurity themed thing around them, because I can do that because I'm boring. And I was overrun with dogs, and I will never complain about that. But people were sending me. It was hard to choose which one, so I had to do 2 or 3 each week. Got quite diplomatic. Yeah.
Just a comment. I have a cat, but I would never even dare bring her to the camera, because I would be clawed to death. Anyway, so just reviewing the final poll, and maybe the panelists have a comment on this. Do you have access to resources such as corporate communication, video, or graphic artists for content production? 29% said yes, they have full access. 50% said yes, I have some access. 7% said no, they don't. And 14% said they don't know. So anybody have thoughts on leveraging the resources within an organization? Obviously, larger organizations have those resources, smaller ones don't. But what do smaller organizations do in this case? Erin.
Sorry, answering the question of like resources.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, as somebody who is currently working very closely with my corporate communications team, that is the relationship next to your security operations team that you need to be best friends with, because they are friends with everybody and everybody wants to listen to them. And as I'm trying to plan my security awareness month, they have been nothing but phenomenal in sending out Slack messages and getting my newsletter out there and inviting us to talk at the all hands meeting. They are your keys to talking to the rest of the organization. So they don't necessarily help me with the creation of my stuff, but I think that's what I'm here for anyways. So I don't mind doing the creation myself. But as far as a relationship to build upon, they are going to be your megaphone and your loudspeaker for whatever you need to say. So
yeah, great comment. Really glad to hear that that's working for you, as well as some organizations I've worked with. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. Just see what else we have to discuss. Ryan, you can check for anything in the chat that we should be.
I mean, chat said basically, to answer my poll question, everyone wants support. No one wants money, everyone wants support. So I mean, we're all here to try and get the same thing done, as suspected. Another thought, Shelley said, security ambassadors are great alternatives to big budgets. They are free, generally highly motivated, and add value to the message, and engage one-on-one to encourage participation. So that, that's I think, to Erin's point of having that kind of that comms channel locked down, that SecOps team, like, oh yeah, we'll bring you stuff. And having those security, kind of those ambassadors, those champions within your organization that they just love it. They breathe it. They're going to go around and talk about it. They're the ones that if there is a breach at, MGM, they're going to maybe, be able to talk to other fellow, coworkers and explain it, which, by having something explained and put into real perspective can make it, you realize, oh, that could be me. And I don't want to be that person, right? So I should pay attention to the training next time. It just goes a long way to build that culture. So great points from the chat. Very busy chat today. So thank you for everyone who participated.
Yeah, it's really good to see. Just a last point, we anticipated a little bit of interest in this topic, so we created a download for people that goes through a lot of the points that I talked about in my initial slide, but the things that I think should be in a security awareness program. And we expand on it a lot with details and examples, and put it into a guide, I don't know, 10 pages or so. So hopefully that's useful to you folks. Feel free to download that. And we look forward to getting any comments on it if you have any.
And just to let Chris know in the chat, the QR code is safe. It is not a phishing test. That is, we are not on the clock right now. We are not trying to trick you. That is legitimate.
Yeah. I gave up my phishing simulation role a long time ago. So yeah.
We didn't even talk about fishing simulations today. Somehow it
how did we not?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Our
but
favorite topic.
maybe that's a good thing. So our next session in 2 weeks, October 4th, at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I forgot to put the time in there, but number 29 will be Finding and Engaging Security Champions, or ambassadors, if we want to call them that. I might change the title just to make it more inclusive. But we want to understand how to identify and leverage security champions. That'll be a fun discussion, and really hope to see everybody back with us on the panel and in the live discussion in chat and on LinkedIn, because today was the first time we've actually streamed an entire session on LinkedIn successfully, just by the skin of our teeth as we started. So thanks to everybody who was listening on LinkedIn as well. So for now, I'm going to wrap it up and say thanks to everybody, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.